The courtroom was silent when she walked in. A folded pink baby blanket rested tightly in her hands, pressed against her chest as if it were the only thing keeping her standing. Her name was Heather Larkin, and for the past 3 weeks, her story had been plastered across every local news outlet in America. A young mother, devastated by the loss of her infant daughter, suing the hospital that killed her baby. People had cried for her, sent donations, and filled her GoFundMe with messages of love and prayer. She was the woman whose pain united strangers across the country. But that morning, when she stepped into Judge Judy's courtroom, something in the air shifted. The cameras didn't just record a case, they captured the unraveling of one of the darkest lies ever televised. Judge Judy sat at her bench with that familiar composure, but her eyes carried the sharpness of someone who'd already seen too much of the world's deceit. Across her decades on the bench, she'd heard every kind of story, every excuse, every performance. Yet something about this mother's grief didn't ring true. Heather's tears fell on command, her sobs trembled just enough to sound believable, but Judy noticed the rhythm. The pauses between gasps were too measured, too perfect. This wasn't grief, it was choreography. Heather began her testimony softly. "My daughter Mila, she was just 6 months old," she whispered, voice trembling. "They said it was a medical error and form mistake. 1 minute she was smiling, the next, she was gone." Her shoulders quivered. The audience sniffled. Someone in the back murmured, "Poor thing." Even the bailiff's expression softened for a second. But not Judy's. She leaned forward, her eyes steady, studying every movement. "Mrs. Larkin," she said, voice low and deliberate, "how long ago did this happen?" Heather hesitated for half a heartbeat before answering. 3 weeks ago, Your Honor." Judy's eyebrows twitched, a small movement invisible to most, but to longtime viewers it meant one thing. Something wasn't adding up. In that brief pause, something remarkable happened. Judy looked down at the evidence file in front of her, neatly stacked papers, printed documents, and a folded email transcript labeled urgent, from Heather L. She hadn't shown it yet. Not to the cameras, not to the audience, not even to the defense. But in that folder were words that would chill every viewer who later saw the episode. Words that would lead to an emergency CPS response before the hearing even finished. Words that hinted at a truth no one in the courtroom was prepared to face. Because behind the tears and the trembling hands, behind the blanket pressed to her chest, something was terribly wrong. Judy felt it. She could see it in Heather's eyes, the occasional flicker of control, the brief glances toward the cameras as if making sure her performance was working. And then there was that blanket. Heather hadn't put it down once. She clutched it like it carried the soul of her dead child, but Judy noticed her thumb moving rhythmically along one edge, tracing something embroidered there. A name. Mila. The letters shimmered faintly under the courtroom lights. For a moment, the room existed in slow motion, the ticking of the wall clock, the faint creak of a camera crane, the sound of Heather inhaling sharply before her next sentence. "I just want justice, Your Honor. I just want my baby's memory to mean something." But those words hit Judy differently. Memory. A word that assumes loss. A word that implies death. And Judy knew, somewhere deep inside her, that the baby wasn't gone at all. The case had arrived on her desk after 2 different agencies flagged inconsistencies. The hospital had no death record under the baby's name. The funeral home listed on Heather's paperwork didn't exist. And 2 days before the hearing, Judge Judy's producer had received an anonymous email. "That baby's alive. Check the mother's house. CPS needs to see this." It had no signature, no source, just an attachment of blurred photographs showing what looked like a crib, sunlight filtering across tiny pink sheets. Judy had forwarded it to the district investigator. She hadn't told anyone else. Not yet. And so, as Heather continued her testimony, the tension grew heavier. The story everyone had believed for weeks began to feel less like a tragedy and more like a trap. Judy didn't interrupt. She waited, observed, measured. Each word Heather spoke layered over the last until the performance became too perfect, too neat. The audience couldn't tell. They still saw a broken mother. But Judy saw a woman who had rehearsed every tear in front of a mirror. And then, just before the first recess, Judy closed the folder, leaned back slightly and said with unsettling calm, "Mrs. Larkin, I hope for your sake that everything you've said today is true." Heather blinked, unsure if that was comfort or warning. She didn't realize that in another part of town, 2 CPS officers were already knocking on her front door. What happened next would dominate social media for days. Emails, threats, emergency custody orders. A courtroom transformed into a national reckoning. Because this wasn't just about a lawsuit, it was about a lie so cruel, it shook America's faith in empathy itself. And if you believe justice always finds the truth, even when it's buried under lies, hit that like button right now. Let's see how many people still believe in karma. Heather Larkin wasn't just another face in the crowd, she had become America's tragic obsession. A 32-year-old single mother from Tulsa, Oklahoma, she appeared on television with trembling lips and bloodshot eyes, clutching her child's photo like it was her lifeline. Every network, every Facebook share, every tearful post carried her name. Devastated mother seeks justice after hospital error kills her baby. People didn't question it, they wept with her. Donations poured in from strangers who believed they were helping a grieving mother bury her child. Her GoFundMe, titled Mila's Memorial Fund, Justice for My Angel, raised $148,000 in just 9 days. She played the part perfectly. She stood on courthouse steps, voice cracking under the weight of grief, talking about how the nurses mixed up her baby's 4 fluids. She posted daily updates online, writing long, poetic paragraphs about loss, heaven, and forgiveness. It was the kind of tragedy that made people feel human again, a story so heartbreaking, it restored empathy in a cynical world. But while America mourned, Heather was busy planning her next move. Behind the curtains of her sorrow, something sinister brewed. Bank statements later revealed she withdrew nearly $40,000 in cash within 2 weeks of receiving donations. She used some to lease a luxury SUV and pay off months of credit card debt. She told friends she needed retail therapy to cope with the pain. They believed her. After all, who questions a mother who lost her child? But the story started to splinter in quiet, almost invisible ways. One neighbor mentioned seeing Heather at the local Target, standing in the baby aisle, holding formula cans and diapers. Another saw her late at night loading something small into the back seat of her car wrapped in a pink blanket. These were whispers easily dismissed as confusion or gossip. But when those whispers reached the wrong ears, or perhaps the right ones, the illusion began to crumble. 3 weeks after the supposed death, an anonymous caller phoned the Tulsa Police Department. "I think the baby's alive," the voice said. "Check her house. Check her social media." The officer took notes but didn't act immediately. After all, the mother had already gone viral as a victim. Who would fake something so cruel, so unthinkable? The report sat in a file until someone at the district attorney's office forwarded it to an old contact who worked on Judge Judy. That's when the case hit Judy's desk. The folder was thin, just a few pages, but it had everything: the wrongful death claim, a forged hospital letter, and a demand for $2 million in pain and suffering. Judy read it twice, then a third time. The hospital's statement seemed off. The dates didn't align. The nurse's name listed on the report belonged to someone who had retired 4 years earlier. Judy closed the file slowly, tapping the edge of her pen against the desk. "Something about this grief feels rehearsed," she muttered. Her bailiff looked up, startled. "You think she's lying about the death, Judge?" Judy didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pushed the folder aside, her eyes narrowing in thought. "Grief doesn't come with a script," she said. "But she's hitting every beat, almost like she practiced it." Within hours, Judy requested the original hospital documents. She wanted every timestamp, every signature, every staff record. The hospital complied, sending over digital copies. What Judy found made her blood run cold. There was no record of any patient named Mila Larkin being admitted to that hospital. Not 3 weeks ago. Not ever. Still, Judy didn't make assumptions. She'd seen too many liars crumble on her bench, some out of guilt, some out of arrogance. But this one felt different. This one felt dangerous. "People lie for money," she told her staff. "But to lie about your own child's death? That takes a kind of darkness most of us can't imagine." Meanwhile, Heather's media tour continued. She sat on a local morning show, hands folded tightly around her coffee cup, talking about her journey through grief. She wore soft colors, beige sweaters, muted lipstick, minimal jewelry, the perfect image of a broken but resilient mother. She smiled faintly when the host offered condolences and said, "I just want to make sure no one else goes through what I did." The audience applauded. The clip went viral again. But one detail slipped through, unnoticed by most, not by Judy. During the interview, Heather's phone vibrated. For a moment, the screen flashed in camera view. A small notification banner appeared: Mila's bottle order has shipped. It was gone in a second, but Judy's producer saw it during review and froze the footage. The team replayed it over and over. That single line became the thread that would unravel the entire web of lies. By the time the lawsuit's hearing date was scheduled, Judy was already suspicious, not just of Heather's story, but of the emotional precision with which she performed it. Most grieving parents break unexpectedly, mid-sentence, mid-memory. Heather never slipped. Her grief was too smooth, her pauses too perfect. It wasn't trauma, it was theater. So when she finally appeared before the bench, carrying that same pink blanket and that same trembling voice, Judy was ready. She didn't see a mother anymore. She saw a performer who had learned how to make the world cry, and planned to make them pay for it. Heather's mask was flawless. But Judy had seen masks like it before. And this time she was ready to rip it off. The moment the gavel struck, the courtroom transformed into a stage, and Heather Larkin was ready for her starring role. She stood at the plaintiff's podium, trembling hands gripping her papers, her voice cracking at the edges of every word. "Your Honor," she began softly, "my baby, my Mila, she was my world." Her breath hitched on cue and she pressed a tissue to her eyes. The cameras zoomed in, catching the single tear that slid perfectly down her cheek. It was a flawless performance, one that might have fooled anyone else. But not Judge Judy. From the bench, Judy sat motionless, eyes half-lidded, studying Heather with the quiet precision of a surgeon. Every tremor, every pause, every sigh, she took it all in. Judy had seen this before. People who rehearsed their sadness until it sounded believable. But grief wasn't theater. It was messy, raw, unplanned. Heather's grief, though, felt rehearsed, like a monologue delivered 100 times in front of a mirror. "Mrs. Larkin," Judy said calmly, her voice like ice over fire, "tell me exactly what happened the night your daughter died." Heather clasped her hands dramatically and began her story. "It was around midnight, Your Honor. I was rocking her to sleep when suddenly she stopped breathing. I called the hospital. They said bring her in immediately. But when we arrived, it was too late." She buried her face in her palms, shaking her shoulders. The audience gasped softly. Judy didn't move. "Do you have any proof of this event?" Judy asked. Heather nodded quickly, her hand trembling as she lifted a folder. "Yes, Your Honor. Her death certificate. And the hospital's letter admitting fault." Judy gestured for the bailiff to bring it forward. The courtroom fell into that heavy silence where every paper shuffle and footstep echoed like thunder. The hospital's attorney, a calm woman in her 40s named Ms. Donnelly, stood and adjusted her glasses. "Your Honor," she said carefully, "we've reviewed this document, and there's an issue." Judy's brow lifted. "An issue?" Ms. Donnelly stepped closer, holding the certificate like a piece of contaminated evidence. "This death certificate," she said, "is dated 2 days before the alleged incident." A murmur rippled through the room. Judy leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "Before?" "Yes, Your Honor. According to this, the child died on April 7th. But the mother claims the death occurred on April 9th. Heather blinked rapidly, stammering, It must be a typo. A clerical error." But Judy wasn't buying it. A typo on a legal document certifying a child's death? Her voice carried weight, slicing through the air like a blade. Heather's lips trembled, but no words came. Ms. Donnelly continued, "And there's more. The pediatrician's signature is misspelled. The doctor's last name is Rogers, spelled Rodgers. But here," she pointed, "it's Rodgers." The courtroom went still. Judy's fingers tapped the desk once, twice, then stopped. "Dr. Rogers, are you in the courtroom today?" A woman in a gray blazer rose from the back row. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "And I did not sign that document. That is not my handwriting." Gasps filled the air. Heather's head jerked toward the doctor, her eyes wide. You must have forgotten," she cried. "You saw me that night." The doctor's expression was firm. "Mrs. Larkin, I've never met you in my life." Judy's stare hardened. "Mrs. Larkin," she said, voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone, "are you certain you want to continue this testimony under oath?" Heather's throat bobbed. I just want justice." Judy leaned back slowly, crossing her arms. So do I. That's when Ms. Donnelly lifted a printed photo from her case file. Your Honor, one final piece of evidence. This is from the plaintiff's own social media, a memorial post she made 1 week after the supposed death. She handed the photo to the bailiff, who brought it to Judy. Heather looked confused, fidgeting, eyes darting between them. Judy studied the picture. It showed Heather sitting in her living room, holding the pink blanket, the same one she brought to court, staring at a framed photo of her baby. Candles glowed softly around her, the perfect grief tableau. But Judy's trained eyes caught something the audience hadn't. In the far corner of the image, behind Heather's shoulder, a faint blur, motion. A crib. And inside that crib, the unmistakable outline of a tiny hand reaching upward, fingers curled mid-grasp. Judy's gaze lifted from the photo. Mrs. Larkin, who took this picture? Heather froze. A friend. What friend? I don't remember. Judy's voice sharpened. Then who's in that crib behind you? Heather's breath hitched audibly. That's an old photo. No, Judy said quietly, sliding the photo back toward her. This picture was posted 9 days ago. And that shadow, that isn't old. That's alive. The room erupted, whispers, camera shutters, even the audience gasping in disbelief. Heather's face drained of color. For the first time her mask cracked. Judy didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. She simply lifted her gavel and said, "We're taking a 15-minute recess." Her tone was calm, but her eyes said everything. She already knew. As the bailiff escorted Heather out, Judy turned to her producer and whispered something that wasn't picked up by the microphones. Call CPS. Now. Because the truth was no longer hiding in the shadows of a photograph. It was alive and breathing. The second the courtroom door closed for recess, Judge Judy moved like a commander preparing for battle. She didn't speak to her staff. She didn't take a sip of water. She simply rose from her chair, motioned her producer closer, and whispered, "Get me Child Protective Services, now." The energy in her voice was quiet but absolute. Her instincts had never been wrong, and today something far deeper than fraud was unfolding. Within minutes, Judy was on a secure call with a CPS supervisor in Tulsa County. "I need a welfare check," she said, her tone clipped but calm. Address listed on a GoFundMe for Heather Larkin. Possible child in danger, or alive when declared deceased. There was a silence on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Alive?" the officer repeated. Judy's eyes hardened. "That's what we're about to find out." The courtroom staff pretended to busy themselves, but everyone could feel the weight of what was happening behind the scenes. Even the cameras had stopped rolling, momentarily paused at Judy's request. She knew the footage they were capturing could end up as evidence, not entertainment. The producers watched, wide-eyed, realizing this episode had gone far beyond television drama. This was real. When CPS finally called back, the voice on the line sounded shaken. "Your Honor," the supervisor began, "we dispatched 2 officers to the address on the GoFundMe profile. They spoke with neighbors who confirmed seeing a baby matching the description of Mila Larkin, alive and well, less than 48 hours ago." Judy's hand tightened around the phone. 48 hours, she repeated slowly. "So that means—" "Yes, ma'am," the supervisor said grimly. "If this report is accurate, the child was never deceased." For a long moment, Judy didn't respond. Her mind flashed through every second of the morning's testimony, the trembling voice, the fake tears, the deliberate pauses. It wasn't grief, it was performance art. But the worst part wasn't the lie. It was the risk. A mother who could fake a child's death could do anything, and Judy wasn't about to wait for the worst to happen. "Secure the child," she ordered. "I'll handle the rest." When the session resumed, the air in the courtroom felt heavier. The audience filed back in, whispering nervously. Even the bailiff's usual humor was gone. He kept glancing toward Judy like he could feel the storm about to break. Heather Larkin re-entered, face pale but chin held high, clutching that same pink blanket like armor. Judy sat perfectly still, composed as marble. But her eyes burned with controlled fury. "Mrs. Larkin," she said softly, "before we continue, I have a quick question." Heather smiled faintly, trying to maintain her fragile image. "Of course, Your Honor." Judy's tone was deceptively gentle. "Are you aware," she said, pausing just long enough for every heartbeat in the room to stop, that Child Protective Services is currently at your residence? The words hit like a thunderclap. Heather's mouth fell open, her face draining of color. What? She stammered. Judy didn't blink. You heard me. CPS is on site, Mrs. Larkin. Would you like to explain why a baby matching your daughter's description was seen alive there less than 48 hours ago? The courtroom exploded in gasps. The sound was almost cinematic. Disbelief, outrage, shock. A woman in the audience covered her mouth. The hospital's attorney closed her eyes in vindication. The bailiff instinctively stepped closer to Heather, anticipating what might come next. Heather shook her head violently. That's impossible. My baby is gone. Judy leaned forward, her voice like a blade. Is she? Because I have an investigator on the line who seems to disagree. They've confirmed there are signs of a child living in your home, recent food deliveries, baby formula receipts, and a crib visible through the window. Heather's composure shattered. That's not true. Someone's framing me. Framing you? Judy repeated, tone darkening. Then perhaps you can explain these emails my staff received this morning. She reached for a small stack of printed pages on her bench, pages the audience hadn't seen until now. The paper crackled as she lifted it, the silence suffocating. These, Judy said, were sent to my production office early today. They came from your email address, Mrs. Larkin. Care to know the subject line? She looked down, then read aloud. Stay out of my business or you'll regret it. Heather's voice cracked. That's not mine. Someone hacked me. Judy's gaze sharpened. You're telling me someone hacked your account, sent multiple threats to court staff, and used your personal signature? She held up another page. This one reads, the baby's gone. If you send CPS, I'll make you regret it. The courtroom went completely silent. Not a cough, not a whisper. Even the cameraman froze. Heather's chest rose and fell rapidly. Those were drafts, she blurted out. I was just writing out my emotions. Judy's reply was cold and surgical. Drafts don't send themselves, Mrs. Larkin. And emotions don't threaten public officials. Heather's knees buckled slightly, her hands trembling so violently that the pink blanket slipped from her grip and fell to the floor with a dull, heavy sound. It landed between her feet, embroidered letters, Mila staring up like an accusation. Judy didn't move. She just watched. The audience could feel something enormous shifting, the power dynamic, the tension, the truth. Mrs. Larkin, Judy said finally, voice steady and lethal. This isn't a grieving mother's case anymore. This is a criminal investigation. And if that child is alive, you will answer for every lie you've told under oath. Heather stood frozen, her lips trembling, her eyes wide with panic. She looked toward the cameras as if hoping to find sympathy one last time, but this time, all she found was silence. And somewhere, far from the courtroom, a baby's cry echoed faintly through a police radio. Judge Judy leaned back, folded her hands and whispered, almost to herself, justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs proof. The trap had been set. The truth was coming. And the world was about to watch it unfold live. The courtroom was no longer a stage, it was a live confession box, and the entire nation was watching. Judge Judy stood behind her bench, her presence commanding total silence. The papers in her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the controlled fury of a woman who had just read the ugliest words ever sent to her court. Mrs. Larkin, Judy began, her tone low, even, and dangerously calm, I'm going to read something to you, and I want you to listen very carefully. Heather's voice cracked. Your Honor, please. Quiet, Judy snapped. You've said enough lies for one lifetime. She lifted the first printed page, the crisp paper echoing in the heavy silence. This email, she said, was received by my producer at 4:16 this morning. It was sent from your personal Gmail account, the same one connected to your GoFundMe, your PayPal, and your lawsuit filings. Heather's breathing grew shallow. The audience leaned forward, sensing the gravity of what was coming. Judy's eyes scanned the page. Then she read, slowly, each word landing like a hammer strike. If you dig into my case, I'll make sure your show ends before you do. A gasp tore through the courtroom. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. The cameraman froze, unsure if he should zoom in or stay back. Judy didn't flinch. She turned the page over. And here's another, she said, voice tightening. Received at 6:41 a.m. 2 hours later. The next line she read louder, clearer, each syllable slicing through the room like ice. The baby's gone, and if you bring CPS you'll regret it. The courtroom exploded in chaos. Gasps, whispers, the scraping of chairs. People couldn't contain themselves. This wasn't just fraud anymore. It was a threat, a confession, and a cry for attention all in one. Judy slammed her gavel once, the crack echoing through the room like thunder. "Order," she barked. "Sit down, every one of you." The noise died instantly. Judy turned her glare back on Heather, who looked like her world was caving in. Her lips trembled as she shook her head over and over. "That wasn't supposed to. I didn't mean it like that. I was angry. I was just trying to." Judy cut her off. "Trying to what? Scare people into silence? Threaten government officers because they might find the truth you buried with fake tears and forged papers?" Heather's voice rose, breaking into raw hysteria. "You don't understand. I did it for attention. For sympathy. I didn't mean for it to go this far." The audience gasped again. The cameras caught every word, every tear, every trembling breath. Judy stepped out from behind her bench, something she almost never did. Her voice carried across the courtroom like a storm gathering momentum. "You faked your child's death for money," she thundered, "and when the system you tried to manipulate started to close in, you threatened the very court that was trying to protect your living daughter." Heather's knees buckled. "I didn't hurt her. I never hurt her." "That's the only truth you've told all day," Judy snapped back. "But you did hurt everyone who believed you, the nurses who cried for you, the donors who gave their savings, the real mothers out there who buried children and watched you exploit their grief for profit." The cameras zoomed in as Heather sank into her seat, clutching her head, sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't performance anymore, it was collapse. The audience could feel the moral weight pressing down. Even through the screen, viewers would later say they felt something shift, that line between sympathy and disgust snapping clean in half. Judy's tone softened, but it was sharper for it. "Mrs. Larkin, you don't just owe this court an explanation. You owe an apology to every decent parent who's ever lost a child and still had the courage to tell the truth." Heather whispered something no one could hear, then lifted her tear-streaked face. "I just wanted to feel important." The room went silent again. Even Judy paused, stunned not by the words themselves, but by the emptiness behind them. That single sentence, selfish, hollow, chilling, revealed everything. Heather hadn't been broken by grief. She'd been addicted to attention. Judy nodded slowly, almost to herself. "Well," she said, voice heavy with finality, "you got what you wanted. The attention of the entire country. But you forgot one thing." She raised her finger toward Heather. "America may love a tragedy, Mrs. Larkin, but it hates a fraud." The audience erupted into spontaneous applause. Some stood, some cried, but all of them felt it, that pure satisfaction that only comes when justice stops being a word and becomes a moment. Heather buried her face in her hands, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. The bailiff stepped forward, his hand hovering near her shoulder, unsure if she'd faint or lash out. Judy didn't move. She simply turned back toward her bench, her voice steady and final. "This court will not tolerate manipulation. It will not reward deceit. And it will never allow a mother to profit from the illusion of a dead child." The gavel came down once, echoing through the air like thunder. And right there, in that instant, Judge Judy didn't just expose a lie. She restored something the country had started to lose: faith that truth, no matter how buried, always finds a way out. So if you think this mother deserves the full weight of justice, comment CPS heroes below. Let's see how many people still stand with the truth. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The air in Judge Judy's courtroom hung thick with disbelief, like the pause before a storm breaks. Heather sat trembling at the plaintiff's table, clutching the edge of the podium as if it might save her from drowning in the reality she had created. The audience stared, some in shock, others in quiet rage. Then, faintly at first, came a sound no one expected, the distant wail of sirens, growing louder by the second. Judy's eyes flicked toward the courtroom doors. She didn't say a word. But the tiniest nod to her bailiff confirmed what everyone feared, and hoped, at once. Something was happening outside. The sirens drew closer until they stopped right at the courthouse steps. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The door creaked open. A uniformed CPS officer stepped inside, carrying a small bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. The entire room gasped, some audibly, some with hands flying to their mouths. There, resting peacefully against the officer's chest, was baby Mila. Alive. Healthy. Breathing. Heather's eyes locked onto the child, and her entire body went rigid. No, that's not, she choked, her words dissolving into a guttural sob. That's not possible. But it was. The officer approached the bench, her expression calm but resolute. Your Honor, she said, voice steady, we have confirmed identification through hospital records and fingerprints. The child is safe and in protective custody. The room erupted, an explosion of disbelief, relief, and fury all at once. Cameras flashed. People stood. The energy was electric, overwhelming, uncontrollable. And in the middle of it all, Heather Larkin collapsed. Her knees hit the floor, her sobs shaking through the room. Please, she cried, please, I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted to start over. I was going to come clean. Judge Judy stood. Her face was stone, but her eyes burned with a controlled fire. Mrs. Larkin, she said, her voice low and powerful, you don't start over by burying your living child in a lie. Heather looked up, eyes swollen and red. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Judy stepped forward, closing the distance between justice and deception. You knew exactly what you were doing, she said sharply. You faked your child's death for money. You threatened this court. And worst of all, you made millions of Americans grieve for a baby who was never gone. That isn't fear, Mrs. Larkin, that's manipulation. Heather's cries turned to gasps. Please don't take her from me. Judy's voice softened, but the edge remained. You took her from yourself the moment you turned her into a prop for sympathy. She turned to the bailiff. Take her into custody. Charges: fraud, child endangerment, and criminal threats to a federal court. The bailiff nodded, stepping forward. As Heather's wrists were bound in silver cuffs, the crowd burst into applause, not the kind you hear at the end of a show, but the kind that comes from deep human relief. It was raw. It was real. It was justice. Even the camera operators, hardened from years of filming court drama, blinked back tears. Judy turned toward the CPS officer, who still held baby Mila close. Make sure that child is placed somewhere safe, she said. The officer nodded and exited quietly, the baby's tiny fingers curling around the edge of the pink blanket, the same one her mother had brought to court as a symbol of grief. Outside, the sirens faded. But inside, the echo of that moment lingered like a heartbeat through the walls. A montage followed in the days that came, the Department of Justice confirming an investigation into Heather's fraud, GoFundMe freezing her accounts and refunding donors, news anchors replaying the clip on every network. A CPS spokesperson stood before reporters and said, thanks to the quick response of Judge Judy and our investigative team, a child was rescued before her mother's deception caused irreversible harm. Clips spread across TikTok and X, formerly Twitter, stitched and captioned with disbelief. The world watched, replayed, and shared the moment the truth walked through those courtroom doors. #Justice for Mila trended globally within hours. Even the harshest corners of the internet, where empathy rarely lives, fell silent for once, because this wasn't just entertainment. It was something bigger. It was proof that real justice still existed. And yet, amid the chaos, there was a quiet stillness in Judy's chamber that night after filming wrapped. The crew had gone. The lights were dimmed. She sat alone at her desk, staring down at the same pink blanket, now sealed as evidence. For the first time that day, she let the emotion show, not anger, not triumph, but sorrow. A child used as a lie, she murmured to herself. God help us. She stood, adjusted her robe, and whispered the line that would later headline every news clip, every TikTok edit, every viral reel. You can fake tears. You can forge papers. But you can't fake a heartbeat. The next morning, every news outlet in America played that sentence. Reporters replayed it like scripture. It wasn't just the ending of a case, it was the restoration of something people had forgotten they needed. Truth with teeth, justice with heart. And in that single, unforgettable moment, Judge Judy didn't just win a case. She reminded America that justice might take its time, but it always shows up. The trial ended, but its echo refused to fade. In the days that followed, Heather Larkin's name flooded every news outlet, every headline, every search bar across America. What began as a tragic mother's tale had been unmasked as one of the most calculated frauds ever witnessed on national television. The footage of Judge Judy's confrontation, the moment baby Mila was carried into the courtroom alive, spread across the internet like wildfire. People weren't just watching, they were reacting. Within 48 hours the clip reached 20 million views. By the end of the week, it had surpassed 42 million, and counting. The hashtag Justice for Mila dominated TikTok and X, while news anchors debated the psychological depth of the mother's deception. Memes, podcasts, and even late-night hosts couldn't stop talking about it. Some called it the trial that broke America's trust in tears, while others hailed it as the moment truth went viral. Heather's sentencing came quickly. The evidence was overwhelming: fake documents, fraudulent fundraising, threats to a court, and emotional manipulation of millions. She was handed a 7-year federal prison sentence for fraud, child endangerment, and criminal threats. The courtroom, this time without cameras, was quiet as the verdict was read. Heather didn't look up. Her voice, once dramatic and commanding, was gone. She only whispered one thing before being led away: "Tell her. I'm sorry." No one ever confirmed whether she meant Judge Judy or Mila. The child she had once turned into a weapon of sympathy found peace elsewhere. CPS released an official statement 2 months later. Mila has been safely placed with a loving foster family and is thriving in her new environment. The photo they shared, a small hand holding a stuffed rabbit under golden sunlight, became the symbol of hope America didn't know it needed. It wasn't just a happy ending. It was proof that truth had saved something innocent. Judge Judy, meanwhile, never bragged, never took credit. But the clip of her verdict became legendary. 42 million views in a single week, one of the most watched courtroom moments in online history. People described her voice, her tone, her final words as something almost spiritual, not just legal authority but moral authority. "You can fake tears," she'd said, "you can forge papers, but you can't fake a heartbeat." That single line ended up engraved on fan art, printed on t-shirts, even quoted in editorials about ethics and trust. For the first time in years, the public wasn't cheering a scandal. They were cheering justice. The ripple effect didn't stop in the courtroom. Hospitals across the country began updating their child identification and record verification systems. Birth and death certificates were given stronger federal tracking standards. GoFundMe publicly announced new policies requiring stricter medical proof for memorial fundraisers, citing the Heather Larkin case as their reason for reform. What one woman used for greed ended up reshaping the system she exploited. But beneath the headlines and policy changes, something more profound stirred in the American conscience. People began asking harder questions. About who they trusted, about what they believed online, about the cost of empathy in a digital world where lies spread faster than truth. And through it all, the image of Judge Judy standing behind her bench became the symbol of accountability itself. She wasn't just a judge anymore. She was the nation's mirror, reminding everyone watching that morality doesn't fade with age or fame. Months later, a journalist asked her during an interview how it felt to become a viral hero again after so many years on television. Judy smiled faintly, leaned back, and said, "It's not about going viral. It's about reminding people that justice still matters, even when it's not trending." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. "So what's the lesson?" he asked. Judy looked into the camera, the same way she did in her courtroom when she wanted the entire country to feel the weight of her words. "In a world full of fake tragedies," she said, "this case proved something real, that one judge still puts truth above sympathy." That clip went viral too, of course. Because it wasn't scripted, wasn't exaggerated, it was real. And in that authenticity, people found what they'd been missing: a reason to believe again. And if this story restored your faith in real justice, hit that subscribe button right now, because next week, a senator's wife tries to fake a baby adoption on live TV, and Judge Judy's response will leave you speechless. Because justice isn't quiet anymore. It doesn't hide in the shadows. It doesn't whisper behind legal walls or wait politely for approval. Justice is loud. Justice is viral. And it has a name: Judge Judy.